Okay, episode 5 is alive. As always, it's me, Chucky, from the forums, and we've got Jigsaw.
Hey, how you doing, guys?
As usual, we've got 5 movies to discuss, and we may just have a general discussion about other things after that.
Okay, guys, tonight we have some pretty classic movies. First up is the 1987 classic Hellraiser, a movie of which many horror fans I'm sure know, if not seen multiple times. Following that, the 1983 slasher Sweet 16. Then we have a non-horror entry being Death Sentence from 2007 starring Calvin Bacon. Following that, a interesting vampire flick named Near Dark from 1987. And to finish us off, we have the new Child's Play movie, which came out just, a week and a half ago. So, should be some exciting stuff.
Woo! So to start us off, we're discussing Hellraiser from 1987. It's about a man named Frank who opens a portal to hell when he tinkers with a special puzzle box that he's bought while abroad. It unleashes some gruesome beings known as the Cenobites who tear Frank's body apart in an act of ultimate pain and pleasure. When Frank's brother and his wife Julia move into Frank's old house, they accidentally bring what is left of Frank back to life. And as Julia was having an affair with Frank before he died, he convinces her to lure men back to the house so he can use their blood to essentially reconstruct himself. So I think Hellraiser is a really good movie. It's a fairly unique movie, especially for its time. I didn't end up watching this one until I was about maybe 16 or 17 years old, so it wasn't anywhere near one of the earlier horror movies that I saw. So I probably saw it back in the late 90s, I guess, or around 2000, somewhere around there. I think it's responsible for creating the iconic character Pinhead, which is obviously a beloved character in the horror community. It's got some really cool, gory and bloody effects, and definitely set a new standard for horror movies going forward, I think. The cast in the movie does well. I don't really feel there's any standout performances. I wouldn't even necessarily say that I love Doug Bradley's performance as Pinhead. It's good, but I think it's more the allure of the character itself. But in terms of acting performance, I don't think he quite reaches the same level of my other favorite horror personalities, like Chucky, Pennywise, Freddy. What are your thoughts on this one?
Well, just to tag on to that thought, I don't particularly like the character of Julia. I do think the actress does a pretty good job though, because she is such a bitchy character. Like throughout the whole movie, she has one of the most hateable characters, probably one of the top 5 in the 1980s. So I don't like her character, but I think the actress does a good job. The movie as a whole is one of those classics which I enjoy, but it's not one I particularly love. It's definitely a unique movie. It's just really different from a lot of the slashers of the early to mid 80s. I can't think of many movies that really feel like Hellraiser. The design of the Cenobites, most of them are pretty fantastic. The special effects, generally speaking, are pretty good. And even though there's some really strange things in this movie, some things that don't quite make some sense, I suspect many horror fans can sort of look past that. Even if it's not a fantastically made story, it's such a classic feel to it. Now, out of interest, what about Doug Bradley's Pinhead did it do it for you entirely?
Well, I think it's just that he's got such like a monotone personality. Like there's no real highs or lows to his performance. It's almost like watching a robot. So I think it's just simply that. And maybe that's not necessarily his performance. That's just kind of the character and limitations of the character. It's not like he can start singing show tunes or anything.
I'd be okay with that. Hellraiser the musical.
Yeah. So well, maybe they'd make for something even more interesting. But no, I mean, it's a good character, and I think he does well with it, but it's just one of those characters that just doesn't quite reach the same heights as those other personalities that I mentioned, like my favorite ones.
I do think what makes Pinhead somewhat unique is that he's not necessarily, well, I guess it depends on how you look at it, but he's not necessarily an overtly malicious character. He is simply doing what I guess he is supposed to be doing. So I just think it's a sort of an interesting character trait.
And I guess another thing is that even when he is doing something with all the hooks and everything, he's really just standing there watching hooks, fly around and stuff. It's not like he's going up and stabbing people and ripping them apart.
Yeah, I think he's long past feeling pretty much anything, so... Which I guess is somewhat the point of the Cenobites.
Yeah. The weird hobo guy in the movie, I mean, it just seems like there's some scenes in there that, I don't know, I mean, I don't really know if what does he turn into, like a dragon or something at the end?
I always took it as like a demon.
Demon, yeah.
But, angel do some, demons do others, am I right?
Yeah. So I'm not quite sure I really cared for that part to the movie. I think even if they left that part out, it would have been fine.
Yeah, and there's just a few things that make this movie a little, more difficult to get into. The whole thing of whether or not this is supposed to take place in the US or the UK, because there's so many people with British accents in this movie, but then the main characters, for the most part, are American. It just feels strange.
Yeah.
And that's in Australian, I can imagine. It doesn't matter one ounce to you.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly notice it. Doesn't bother me.
Yeah, to me, it's one of the things that isn't talked about much. It's like, they made this movie and did it, just forgot to mention it.
It's a little slow as well at times, especially in that first half or whatever. Well, it's not dull or anything. It just, sometimes it just takes a little while before it really gets moving.
Yeah, I'll be honest. Most of the parts with Julia finding and killing men didn't do it for me. I thought the Cenobites were so much more interesting than Julia was.
Yeah, those scenes probably could have been a little more exciting, I guess. Yeah, if we saw more of how Frank's eating these people, or whatever he does to, I guess he just kind of soaks in their blood.
It's like sucking up the life energy and gaining himself. Frank is a pretty, he's a pretty sadistic guy. I do have to say I enjoy his performance, especially toward the end of the movie.
He thinks he's such a badass. I'll kick his ass.
I mean, that one line, like, "Calm to daddy," was it? It just, that was, even when I was a kid, I thought it was a creepy line. Nowadays, it might not be perceived the same. But back then, I thought it was a sort of creepy line.
Nowadays, that's what everyone uses to get off, I guess. And I don't, but
of course you don't. Another thing I wanted to mention, and this may just be me, but near the very beginning of the movie, when the Larry, I believe his name is, cuts his hand on that nail, that scene, ever since I was a kid and I've seen this movie, that slow cut on his hand, and the blood spilling, that scene always got to me. I'm not sure why, because most of the time things like that don't bother me, but I always sort of cringe when I see that scene, even now.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like a pretty bad cut. It's kind of like one of those situations where you get a hand in a spot, you can't really do too much about it because other people are pulling the mattress one way, and you can't really just kind of like, as soon as it starts, you can't just pull your hand away because it's kind of stuck there. It kind of just makes you go, ugh.
It's interesting. Hellraiser, to many people, is a really classic horror movie, but in my view, there's not a whole lot that you can really speak much about. It's like we said, the special effects are fantastic, but in my experience, pretty much every horror fan has seen Hellraiser, and generally speaking, there's pretty positive feelings on it. But I've never seen many overly long-winded conversations about Hellraiser. People pretty much like, hey, yeah, it's a good movie. The 16 sequels.
Yeah, well, I haven't read the book, as you know. I don't read books.
Yeah, so I actually, I did once try to read, this is, I believe, based off a novella titled The Hellbound Heart. I started reading it, which details Frank's experience after finding the box. And I really enjoyed I guess, I'm not sure if they're called chapters, but I really enjoyed the first segment. Never actually finished it, but I suspect the movie probably threw a few new things in, but from my understanding, there wasn't a whole lot that was necessarily changed. Of course, if anybody has read that novella, let me know if I'm wrong. So, Hellraiser is an enjoyable movie. There's some scenes that necessarily didn't do it for me. Just some things that just seem out of place, and not necessarily explain that well. These partial effects are pretty fantastic. I really love the hooks flying out from some torturous abyss and just latching onto someone. I mean, that's some pretty violent stuff. Hellraiser has a lot of things to offer horror fans, and like I said, it's a movie I enjoy, but I'm not like hard over heels about. I'll probably just give it around an 8, which is definitely above average, but there's so many other horror movies from the 80s that I'd probably prefer to watch over Hellraiser.
Yeah, I mean, I give the movie an 8 out of 10. It is a bit slow at times. The effects are really good. It does have one or two standout scenes. As I was saying earlier, Pinhead's character, there is an allure about the character that really wants you to see more of him, but he only has a fairly limited role in the actual movie itself. So, yeah, you kind of finish the movie wishing it had a little more bits and pieces of certain characters, or it did a few things differently. Overall, a good classic horror movie. One that I really enjoy watching, but I don't find particularly special.
Well, following that, we have the slasher Sweet 16 from 1983. Being a slasher, the plot's not something that's overly complex. A family moves into a town. Teenage girl tries to make some friends. Many of the people she meets end up dying, and she becomes a suspect by the town's sheriff. And the sheriff has a daughter who's also trying to investigate these murders. She's sort of like the amateur detective type. And there's sort of a mystery unfolding throughout the movie of who is doing these killings. Like I said, some people are suspecting the new girl named Melissa. Others are suspecting some Native Americans who live in the town. And there's decent amount of mystery in this movie. And that's probably the one pretty positive thing about it. Sweet 16 is a movie that's decent, but there were so many slashes from the early 80s, and with so many movies trying to compete, in my opinion, it's somewhat hard for a slasher to really stand out unless they really have a kick to it. Sweet 16, in my opinion, didn't really have that kick. It's still enjoyable. I'm a big slasher fan, but did it have everything I was hoping for? Honestly, many of the kills were somewhat repetitive, and while I did like the mystery, I was hoping for a little more. I believe they'll track you of a slightly different take.
Well, yeah, it's certainly a movie that you don't watch for special kills. I mean, everything is just, kind of like a first-person close-up stabbing motion for at least the few kills in the movie that I can recall off the top of my head. I think on the surface, it's a very simple plot, and then we get towards the end, and we actually kind of find out more about what's going on, and that part I really enjoyed. I can't really... I don't want to go into too much detail about it, just in case there's anyone out there who actually wants to watch a movie, and I don't want to spoil anything. I don't know if this is a thing for me or not, but I can maybe bring up one or two examples. But if there's movies out there that deal with people who have been thrown mentally unbalanced due to abuse... There's another movie I watched, I think it's called Up Against Amanda, which is a bad movie overall, but the ending of the movie had a similar sort of thing to this one. Not a similar scene, but a similar kind of theme as to why things happened. And both of those really stuck out to me. And another thing about this movie is that, and I've brought this up in previous episodes, where anytime the location of the movie reminds me of where I grew up, and this one very much does. It reminds me of the small town that I grew up in. It's not exactly a very green area. Where was this film? Texas? It looks like it's in some...
Yeah, I believe it's Los Angeles, California, okay. Which is probably a much different place in the 80s than it is nowadays.
Yeah.
I mean, apparently so. Because I definitely thought this looked like Texas also.
Yeah, but it's all those rural type locations. You could walk a mile and be away from the next person's house. That type of thing. Anytime I watch movies like that really helps me relate more to what's happening in the movie, I guess.
I think my main question about the movie is whether or not the theme song of Melissa's is a bit over the top, or is it just the right type of emotional thing you're looking for? Because I'll be honest, it was like a 50-50 type thing for me. Yeah. Like the first time might have been okay, but then it came back again, and like,
Well, I mean, I must admit, I actually listen to that song a lot. Like, the soundtrack's on Spotify, so which is kind of weird for a early 80s obscure slasher movie to have a soundtrack on Spotify.
that sounds impressive, actually.
And it's actually got two versions of it. It's got the actual song version, then like an instrumental version where it's basically the music, but with extra guitar played on top of it in place of the actual vocals. But I mean, that song, if the movie didn't have that song, I probably would drop my rating down a point, as silly as that seems. I don't know, there's something about that song being played, especially at the end with those freeze frame type endings. I don't know, I'm a bit of a sucker for freeze frame type endings like that.
I'll say the ending actually reminded me a little of Prom Night, which we discussed. I believe that was the first show, because it's sort of a downbeat ending, which isn't really spoiling much. Many slashes have downbeat endings, and there's a song playing. It's just it's a moment that might stick with you after you finish the movie.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you brought that up because I actually had the same thought on that too. Like I was going to use Prom Night as the exact same example, and you can probably tell from the ratings that I put on the website that I rate them very similarly.
As what you mentioned, I actually think most of the main cast for this movie is pretty solid. As Pastor props go to Bo Hopkins, who plays the main sheriff, and he has a very southern feel to him, and he definitely feels like the exact type of guy that would be a sheriff in a small town like this.
Yeah, I definitely enjoyed his role in the movie as well.
Yeah, so certainly probably, in my opinion, one of the more realistic ones. I especially like the interplay between him and his children. There's no way in modern day America a cop would bring his children to a crime scene, but or to go interrogate a suspect. But it shows really the really small size of this town, which I've never lived in a town quite this small. I just really like that really sort of secluded atmosphere.
And there are a few people in the movie who have some, they are in a few other well-known movies, like Dana Kimmel. She was in Friday the 13th Part 3, I think.
Yeah.
Don Shanks, he was the main suspect in this movie. He played Michael Myers in Halloween 5.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I didn't know that until I was looking through his IMDb credits, but I thought it was pretty interesting.
Susan Strasberg, the mother in this movie, she's been in some other horror movies. I think there was The Manitou, which comes to mind. But yeah, they've definitely, got some other movies out there in the genre that I'm sure people are familiar with. So it does have a fairly decent cast in it.
Yeah, I just wish... My thing is, I just wish more of the characters in the movie were just a bit more memorable. Because when you think of slasher movies, really, at least in my opinion, and I am happy if people disagree with me, of utmost importance is memorable death scenes. And if you don't really have that, I'm not sure how much some of the other things in the movie can make up for it.
They're not aesthetically pleasing, but there is a certain relentlessness to them.
Yeah, there was some good brutality to a few of them.
Yeah, that's probably a better word. They're kind of more brutal stabbings. Just stab away, and just keep stabbing.
I think another thing that works somewhat against this movie, a birthday-themed slasher was done. This is the Happy Birthday to Me came out in 1981, and generally speaking, that's my opinion, much more memorable and more enjoyable slasher. So then, I'm not sure if Sweet 16 was trying to sort of play off the Happy Birthday to Me, but I mean, I don't know, I like the mystery, but I'm not sure how much more this one, aside from a solid cast, how much more it had going for it.
I have a feeling that they probably weren't really trying to replicate anything from Happy Birthday to Me.
Yeah, I suspect most slashers in the early 80s worked pretty much independently of each other.
Because, I mean, in this movie, it's really only towards the end she has a birthday party, and even the majority of that ending, they're away from the party, and it doesn't even feel like there's much of a birthday in the movie outside of the 2-minute scene in the movie.
Out of interest, do you have any opinions one way or the other of those two overly intoxicated guys who wanted to engage in relations with the now 16-year-old girl?
Yeah.
And we talk about some somewhat despicable individuals.
Yeah, they're in the opening to the movie,
Yes.
and they get off to a pretty bad start right away. So I guess, you can look at this and say, just looking at these people, there's no way this person's only just turning 16.
I'm assuming the actress was... Well, I mean, she had a nude scene, so I'm definitely assuming she was over 16 by that point.
I mean, they all kind of look, 19, 20 at least. So, trying to pass off as 16, bit of a stretch. But we're used to that. We see it all the time in horror movies.
It's part of the charm.
Yeah, we don't make a big deal out of that.
That might be why it's so difficult for me to tell people's ages now, because I'm just so used to horror movies. Oh, this guy's 15. He's playing with some 25-year-old guy.
Yeah.
So, what would your overall feelings on this one be, Chucky?
Well, just overall, I really enjoy the setting of the movie. The kills are fairly brutal, but very quick, and there's not a whole lot to look at from a slasher or a pure slasher aspect. It's more the mystery of who is it, what happens at the end, and of course the cheesy 80s theme song for the music. All of that combined, just, I don't know, it plays into that 80s nostalgic feel that I guess I have in particular for its time period. I give the movie an 8 out of 10. I can definitely see how other people would watch this and be like, there's nothing much at all to like about the movie, but I don't know, it's just a few of these small details that don't particularly resonate with other people that do with me, and that's just what helps throw it into being an enjoyable movie.
I think in many ways, Sweet 16 is somewhat generic, but at the same time, you could probably fairly say that about many of the slashes from the early to mid 80s. I do think the killers are probably the biggest issue with the movie, but there's some pretty good mystery here, and like we alluded to, there's a pretty solid cast here also. I enjoy how they threw in some sort of a look at racism when they dealt with the Native American characters, which is, I thought a little unique. I'm not sure what allowed them to do that, but I sort of enjoyed them throwing that in there to give the movie just a little more depth. I also really enjoyed Dana Kimmel. I thought she had a fantastic performance, and along with Paul Hopkins is probably the standout. Though I think Sweet 16 isn't nearly as good as many other slashers, since I am a giant fan of slasher movies, I'd still give this one an above average rating at 7.5, but it's certainly nothing that would make my top 20, maybe even not even my top 50 slasher movies of the 80s. It's still a decent movie. If you just want a movie you throw in and watch, spend some time with. I mean, you could definitely do much worse, but it's probably not one that I would go back to all that many times.
Next up, we have Death Sentence from 2007. Kevin Bacon stars as a grieving father who decides to take the law into his own hands when his son is senselessly murdered by a gang member. He goes out and kills the young man responsible for his son's death, which leads to the entire gang waging a war on him and his family, and I guess without giving much else away in the movie, a lot of carnage ensues. So this is a movie that I really love. I think Kevin Bacon does a really fantastic job in it, especially for somewhat of a smaller production than some of the other movies that he tends to be in. He could have just cashed in this performance, I guess, and I think he actually goes to great lengths to make it a very good movie. There's some awesome action sequences and plenty of thrilling moments throughout the movie. Possibly the biggest standout is the musical score. I think it was by Charlie Clouser, if I pronounce his name correctly. I believe it was from Nine Inch Nails. So yeah, it's one of my all-time favorite soundtracks, and I think it really helps to elevate the emotional moments during the movie. It's just an enjoyable movie all the way from start to finish for me. I believe you've only just seen this for the first time, so I'm eager to see what you thought of this one.
Yeah, so this is a movie I've known about for a while, but I generally don't go out of my way to watch non-horror movies unless I really, really want to see them, and Death Sentence to me sounded like it could be a pretty good movie, but at the same time it wasn't something I was like, oh, I've got to see this. When I was watching it, I enjoyed quite a bit of it. Some things seemed a bit off to me. I'm not sure if maybe it's just the way I watched it, Some of the lighting seemed iffy. Some of the cinematography seemed almost amateurish. I was, and since this is by the same guy who directed, a few of the Saw movies, I was somewhat surprised. I was also hoping for just a bit more violence in what we got. I mean, it certainly wasn't overly disappointing, but I don't know, I was expecting a little more carnage than just, a lot of the stuff that happened in the last 25 minutes. In many ways, it's quite a depressing movie, and I'm not sure how much I enjoy being overly depressed when watching an action movie. I sort of enjoyed the realistic feel it went for, and the whole idea that, well, I mean, you can keep going after someone for a wrong they did, but then they'll just come after you and nothing's really going to change. That's it's an interesting idea. And I enjoy the movie. I'm just not sure how much I actually loved the movie. I do have to say though, John Goldman was probably the highlight for me. I mean, I did like Kevin Bacon. Don't get me wrong, but John Goldman's very enjoyable actor in my opinion, and especially the sequence when he's showing Kevin Bacon the firearms he has. I think it's quite a bit of fun.
You love your John Goodman. I guess one thing we should touch on is, you said you watched the unrated.
I did, yes.
Yeah, and I think back more or less around the time that this got released, it seemed like almost every movie that came out on DVD always got the unrated treatment. Like, it always had, like, an extra 2-3 minutes thrown in. It was almost like there was a formula that all the studios were going for. Now, for this one, it actually changes the ending to some extent. Very subtle change. I guess I can tell you what the change is, at least for the ending. There are other scenes in the movie, and more scenes featuring John Goodman in the extended version.
I will say, if you do have to spare any listeners from potentially being spoiled, I actually did read the differences between the rated and the unrated version.
So yeah, if you don't want spoilers, just tune us out for 30 seconds or so. So right at the end, the theatrical version shows Kevin Bacon on the couch watching the TV, and the unrated version kind of shows him kind of put his head down like he's died on the couch.
Dude, I'm surprised they made it home, to be honest. But
yeah, after being like shot in the neck and everything. I guess for me, I can still take that ending either way. I mean, but it does change things, I guess.
I mean, I'll be honest, even in the theatrical version, I just can't imagine a situation in which he is alive long enough to get, repaired up by the paramedics. I just don't see it. I think it was way too messed up, no matter how quick they, came for him.
Yeah, well, it's a movie. Ambulance will come up and be like, it's just a flesh wound.
I mean, I think either way, it's a very downbeat ending. I sort of like, I do like how they give sort of like a hope spot, hey, somebody's, okay, or they could be okay, so it gives them sort of a reason to be happy, at least, toward the end. But at the same time, that's amazing that he cast his family, just for, what he did. No, it's pretty, it's pretty depressing. I guess the question to me is, was he wrong?
Well,
I mean, no. I'm not a father, to my knowledge, so it's obviously something I may not be able to say much about. But after the scene, and I don't think this is a spoiler, I'm pretty sure it's based on the movie. After seeing one of your sons killed in a gas station, I mean, I can sort of understand why, hey, I sort of have to go after this guy, especially if the justice system's only going to give him, I think it was 3 to 5 years. I mean, I'm not promoting vigilante action, I'm just talking.
Well, it's a tough thing. Like, I guess, like he says in the movie, you don't really know what you're capable of until you're in that situation. So another thing probably worth highlighting is that the lead, I guess you'd call him the lead bad guy in the movie. The bald guy with the tattoos and everything. If you've actually seen this guy in interviews before the movie, I think he was one of those teen heartthrob type guys, like with Pretty Boy.
I can see it.
And yeah, so it was very strange to see him in this kind of movie because I guess, he shaved his head, put on all these fake tattoos and whatever. They're pretty generic tattoos, to be honest, but I guess they, the effect is all that really matters.
Well, I guess the question is, do you expect gang members to get high quality tattoos?
One thing that really bugs me, this isn't about the movie itself, but still don't have a good Blu-ray of this. You know,
I'm actually somewhat surprised, but
yeah, I mean, it's not, to my knowledge, it's not out on Blu-ray in America. It's not out on Blu-ray in Australia. I've got a Blu-ray from the UK, but it could be so much better. It's a very bare bones release. It's not even in 1080p. I think it's in 1080i, which to some people, even in terms of presentations, probably lacking a little there as well. They need to get onto that.
I do have to say, when I was watching this, it did remind me of another movie I'd seen in the past. And not so much plot-wise, but some aspects of the story definitely rang familiar, being the 2005 movie History of Violence, which has a somewhat similar idea of a seemingly mild-mannered individual, due to violence against his family, turning into a very hardcore, vigilante-type guy. So I definitely got some similar vibes from that. Now, Death Sentence is a much more violent movie, but I just wanted to point that out.
Well, some people say it's a loose remake of Death Wish.
I've actually never seen Death Wish.
Well, they ended up making 5 Death Wish movies. They just kept, making it sillier and sillier. But I believe it is this movie, which is actually based on a novel. I think it's based on the same novel as Death Wish. I'm not. Don't quote me on that, but that's what I hear or what I've heard. But once again, I don't read, so it really has no bearing on my opinion of the movie. And I'm sure you've never read the novel or anything, so
I suspect most people have never read a novel. I mean, God, I think Die Hard was based off a novel, so it's like so many movies, big movies that I'm almost positive 85% of the population has even heard of.
I mean, to what extent is a movie truly based on a novel, though? I mean, we get those movies that say they're based on true events.
Talk about something that pisses me off.
Yeah, but no, I'm sure this is probably at least a little closer to the novel than a movie that says it's based on true events.
Yeah, I just hope the novel's just a little happier than this, but I sort of doubt it.
Well, I mean, sometimes I like seeing a movie with a bit of a depressing ending, and actually, that's now the third movie today I've thought of. We mentioned Prom Night, we mentioned Sweet 16. Both movies that kind of end, I think, on a depressing note and have a standout song play at the end. This is another movie that does the exact same thing. It's got quite a depressing ending as it rolls to the credits, with another standout song. At least for me, it was a standout song.
I was about to say I barely noticed this song, so I'm happy somebody did.
Okay. Whatever.
I will say, and this is probably just because we just spoke about this movie a few weeks ago, but the ending also reminded me a little bit of Drive, too. Some guy sort of going out in a blaze of glory, which, I thought this was a pretty fantastic conclusion. Like the finale, last 15 minutes or so, was pretty much non-stop action, and I appreciated pretty much all of it, especially the shotgun blasts. Those were some good times.
Yeah, so a movie that I surprisingly loved when I first saw it, and still love to this day. I've watched it so many times. I think Kevin Bacon does really well in the movie. It has some really cool chase scenes, like the one chase scene which actually has 3 to 4 minutes of no cuts as they're running throughout a car park, and some people may not have picked up or noticed on that, but that would have been a very difficult scene to film all in one take. I mean, it's got a really awesome soundtrack, which I think, as I said before, it elevates a lot of the emotional scenes in the movie as they're dealing with the death of his son. And like you said, it's a movie that ends quite depressingly with a song, for me, that it stands out for me. So I actually have this as one of my all-time favorite movies. I give it a 10 out of 10.
I think it's a decent movie. I think what the movie is going for is pretty interesting. I'm just not sure how much I enjoyed the movie aside from the violence the movie contained. There's some, a lot of interesting performances here. Like I said, John Goldman's performance here was pretty fantastic. Very different character than what I usually see him playing anyway. I would probably give this movie, it's definitely an above average movie, but I don't know if it's a movie that is like a fantastically above average movie. I'm probably leaning toward a 7.5, maybe rounded down to a 7, because it had a lot of good things in it, but it's just nothing I can see myself going back to anytime soon. Probably a lot more digestible than some other, somewhat recent action movies, but at the same time, it's just, I don't necessarily need all this bleakness in my life.
Coming from someone who watches people get stabbed on screen all the time.
That's a slight difference, thank you very much. But...
Okay.
Next up, we have the somewhat, I'd argue it's a cult classic, somewhat classic movie Near Dark, 1987. It's a vampire movie which, if I recall, I don't think it uses the word vampire once in the movie. It's a very interesting movie in which a gold southern boy, I think he's from either Kansas or Oklahoma, something like that, meets a beautiful young woman and sort of spends a lot of time with her over the course of a night. And then toward the calming down, he finds out, hey, something's really wrong with this woman. Boom, she's a vampire. She bites him, and he is, of course, transformed himself into a vampire. He then sort of gets abducted by the group this young woman is traveling with. A group of vampires who sort of travel cross country and then stealing new vehicles, just changing things up. And he sort of travels with them and has to try to gain their trust after he finds out, well, there's really no way I can go home, because I'm a vampire. So, I'll let you, Chucky, talk about your feelings first, because my feelings are somewhat mixed.
I'm trying to think of when I actually first saw this movie. I'm pretty sure I didn't see it until somewhere in the 2000s. So I definitely didn't see it until I was in my 20s. I'm not a huge fan of vampire movies, as I normally say whenever we talk about a vampire movie. But I guess the good thing about Near Dark is that it doesn't, like you said, they don't even really mention the word vampire, so you don't really see all the genre or subgenre staples of bats and garlic and crosses and steaks and all this other kind of silly stuff that you see in pretty much most other vampire movies. So there's some fairly interesting characters in here, but we don't get a whole lot of backstory, or they talk a little bit about their past. There's a lot of, I guess, open questions that you could have in this type of movie. Bill Paxton, I guess, is a standout in this movie just because he's got a few crazy scenes in the movie. And Lance Henriksen,
What's Lance Henriksen? He does what he always does. So.
Well, Lance Henriksen is Lance Henriksen, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I enjoy the movie. I don't know if I quite think it's a great movie, but in terms of vampire movies, and, I guess we'll call it a vampire movie, because what else do you call it? It's one of the better vampire movies that I watch.
I somewhat agree on your change up just a little. It's probably one of the worst vampire movies. I mean, at least from a perspective of a horror fan. Now, Near Dark is a movie I've only seen twice now. I saw it just, I think, yesterday, and before that I saw it about maybe 2-3 years ago. I didn't particularly enjoy it when I first saw it, which was a disappointment because a lot of people I knew at the time in horror fans from different horror forms spoke pretty highly of this movie. In fact, I have a friend who uses a avatar of Sovereign, Bill Paxton's character, and that's been his avatar for God knows how long. So I know some really big fans of this movie. So when I finally saw it, I was like, it's not quite what I was hoping for. In many ways, it feels more like a moral drama. This guy trying to figure out, what should he do? Stay with his family or stay with a new family, these vampires, with this girl that he has a potential future with, or try to find a way to get back to the family he grew up with. And they throw in a little romance, it feels in many ways a lot more like a drama movie than a horror movie. When the horror aspects come forth, especially the barroom scene, in which these vampires just let loose. That's a fantastic sequence. And there's a few others early on in the movie that are really solid. when those scenes happen, the movie, takes quite a big upturn. But I'll be honest, for a lot of the movie, I wasn't necessarily bored, but I certainly wasn't nearly as engaged as I usually am. And worth mentioning, the final 15 minutes, or maybe it's 20 minutes, that all of that just felt like almost unnecessary. I know, it didn't do much for me. I know there were some pretty emotional sequences. I actually think the final scene is, in a low-key way, I think it's a very nice sequence. But, and I really enjoyed, I forget, I don't have it in front of me, whoever played the father in the movie, who was trying to find his son. I really liked that guy, and I thought he was very strong. But it's not really my type of vampire movie, and I can think of quite a few vampire movies I enjoy over this one. So all of this is to say, if any of you enjoyed it, by all means, enjoy it. But it just didn't do much for me, and having seen it twice, I feel somewhat confident in my feelings toward it.
I know. I think you've said in the past that you're not a huge vampire movie fan, and I'm certain that I'm even less of one because the only other I think this is a decent movie. I think Fright Night's a good movie, the original Fright Night. Those are the only ones that I can even think of.
See, a lot of this comes from, I grew up on, in many ways, I grew up in the Universal horror classics. So when somebody says vampire, I automatically think Bela Lugosi from the 1931 classic Dracula. And of course, there's been another classic horror movie from, I think it was 58, Horror of Dracula, which was that was a Hammer movie, fantastic vampire movie. But I mean, even if you get into newer ages, like you said, Fright Night is one of my probably top 15 favorite 80s horror movies, which I think is a thoroughly enjoyable movie. Then now this one may just be me, but there's also a 1997 Stephen King adaptation titled The Night Flyer, which takes a sort of interesting look at vampires, and that's one from my childhood, which probably explains my very strong enjoyment of the movie. And those are probably the four biggest ones that come to mind. But I mean, even Nosferatu from 1922 is a movie I sort of enjoy more than this one. So I mean, it just comes from probably, I don't know. I guess it's if you've seen a lot of pre 1960s movies, many of them were vampires, and the ones that were like sort of shitty zombie movies. But I don't know, I feel like there's a lot of classic vampire movies out there, and I know that Near Dark really tried to change things up. It's a very atypical movie. And it's actually worth noting, this came out the same year The Lost Boys did. The Lost Boys was another very popular vampire movie, but that one also didn't do much for me.
Yeah, The Lost Boys, I don't mind that movie. I probably wouldn't say it's as good as Near Dark, but I don't mind watching that, I guess. You did actually remind me of one other movie that I've actually only ever saw once, but I did kind of enjoy, and it's still kind of an off-kilter type vampire movie. I think it was called Blood for Dracula, the one with Udo Kier. I'm not sure how familiar you are with that movie.
I'm actually trying to quickly look it up while you speak about it.
But I think I like it probably more just for Udo Kier's performance in the movie. I always think of scenes where he's really needs some blood, and he's like, the blood of these whores is killing me. He needs a virgin. Like yeah. I don't know. It's his accent in the role. It's almost like a dark comedy for me.
Yeah. I think it's the 1974 Blood for Dracula, which I've actually not seen. But
yeah. So back to Near Dark.
Yeah, it would be an interesting idea. Since you're not a big vampire fan, we could probably talk later about what might constitute some of the better vampire movies. Just Near Dark itself is a very atypical movie that took a very much drama type feel to it, which really, to me, it didn't do as much. I would just say Sovereign is a kick-ass character. Like he was a complete wild guy, especially during that barroom scene, which is probably a favorite of mine. Yeah, I'll just say that Near Dark is a movie that I really haven't cared much for anytime I've seen it. I know a lot of people like it, and generally speaking, it's pretty decent reviews. But it's not something that works for me, and I'd probably give it a below average rating of about a 5 out of 10.
Damn, that's pretty low.
Yes, it is. I was trying to soften people's blows, but
especially on your scale.
And for those who may not get that reference, my average rating is 7 out of 10. So a 5 out of 10 is actually pretty low as far as things go. So I apologize for any hurt feelings.
Yeah, well, I mean, my scale's probably more somewhere around 5 to 6 out of 10 is... Well, a 6 out of 10 would be an average movie, I think. So, yeah, with Near Dark, I think it's a decent to good movie. It is a little slow at times, like especially in the beginning, a little dull in certain scenes, and then there are some scenes that stand out, like you said, the barroom scene, and towards the end, I think both scenes with Bill Paxton towards the end and that barroom scene are the main standouts. Outside of that, it's a movie that I just don't find has too many special scenes, at least for me. The actors do pretty well.
I mean, who doesn't like Lance Henriksen? But...
Yeah. You seen one Lance Henriksen movie? You've seen them all.
Well, I would say Pumpkinhead is significantly better than Near Dark, but that can be a battle royale for another time.
I'd have to watch Pumpkinhead again, but to me, they're more or less similar.
No.
In terms of enjoyability, for me, yeah. Yeah, so we're going to talk about the new Child's Play movie, a remake of the 1988 classic, my all-time favorite movie, the original. Anyways, so this new Child's Play movie still follows a sort of similar basic plot. So after moving to a new city, Andy Barclay receives a special present from his mother, which is a seemingly innocent buddy doll that becomes his best friend, because he does have a little bit of trouble making new friends. When the doll suddenly takes on a life of its own, Andy unites with some of these other children that he does make friends with over time throughout his interactions with this new doll, and they all have to kind of band together to stop the sinister toy from wreaking bloody havoc. So it's actually a very different, and I wasn't expecting it to be so different going into it, but it is, aside from some of the basic details, we've got some of the same characters with the same names as the original, and it's still about a killer doll, but there's so much that's different about this movie in comparison to the original. A lot of things unfold differently throughout the movie, and I think if you go into this movie expecting it to replicate the original, and you want to compare them to each other in that way, it's probably going to affect your enjoyment of this new film. Luckily, I went into this one not really caring so much about it being so similar to the original, and in fact, I think I rather applaud that it separated itself from the original, or at least so much more than most other remakes do, and to the point where you could almost change just a few things in the movie, retitle it, and it could be its own movie, really. I think it moves at a rather frantic pace, but I guess in a way that's good because it never really has any dull moments. I really love the first half, or maybe the first 2/3 of the movie, but the second half does get a little messy, maybe a little rushed. I think it perhaps lacks that one special scene to completely throw it over the top, like in the original, when Chucky comes alive. There's not really any scene in this new movie that rivals that scene, but overall, I had a really good time with the movie, and I do have a lot of other points here that we can discuss, but before we do, let's hear your thoughts on this one.
Yeah, actually, before I get into my thoughts, I'm wondering, what was your theater experience with this?
Okay, I've actually seen it twice in theaters.
Okay.
I had to see it twice just to kind of solidify my rating on the movie. It actually came out in Australia just a little bit earlier than it did in the US and most other countries, so I saw it the very first session, which was at 10 a.m. on a Thursday here, which would have been a Wednesday over there. I went and saw it with my wife. We were actually the only people in the theater.
Oh, God. Okay.
And well, I guess I don't know how it works over there, but most people are at work when a new movie comes out here in the very first session. So I actually took the day off work to go watch it. Luckily, being the only people in the theater, I didn't have to contend with other people acting like idiots, which is a story I'll tell later on towards the end of the show, because I did watch another movie last night where I had a very poor experience like that.
Is it Annabelle?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, the second time I saw it, which I saw it a few days later, there were a few people there because it was a Sunday night. There were a few other people, but they were good. They acted appropriately.
Another quick question: did much, in your opinion, change between your first and second viewings of this one?
No, not a whole lot changed. And one thing I do when I watch and rate a movie is I try to compare it to just all these other movies that I would have given similar scores to, and I think, did I enjoy it more or less than those movies? And that's kind of just what I always do, even on the second viewing. And the second viewing, I still enjoyed it as much as the first viewing.
Yeah, so I've just seen this movie once, so my opinion may not matter as much as Chucky's, especially since Chucky's name is Chucky. But I thought, no, this wasn't a surprise to me, but I thought somewhat underwhelmed. I still thought it was a somewhat enjoyable movie, and there's definitely some things I liked about it, but I just sort of expected more from it. And a big part of that might be what you saw, Chucky, that there wasn't really a big scene, even toward the end in the supermarket. Like, there's some chaos, but it wasn't like some extraordinarily memorable sequence that, people are going to be remembering for the next 10 years. I don't know, I liked a lot of the story, but there just wasn't a whole lot here that I thought, well, this is going to be something that's going to stick with me. One of the big issues with me, there's only, in my opinion, only one kill in the movie that was even particularly great. One of them had the potential to be okay, but the lighting was just a bit dark. And one of them was sort of a generic car crash type thing, and that also didn't do a whole lot for me. I liked a lot of the characters, and I think another big issue was just I couldn't get over the face change. It's just throughout the movie I kept looking at that face and like that's not. I don't know, it just sort of rubbed me the wrong way. I know it's probably something that many people could probably get over, but every time I saw Chucky on screen, I'm like, it doesn't do it for me. The new origin story was really interesting. I'll be honest, I'm sort of like 50-50 and rather than I liked it, but it did lead to a little more interesting beginnings for Chucky.
The doll itself, like I was saying at the start, if you're comparing, well, pretty much anything to the original and side by side, you're probably going to think, well, this doll looks even sillier than the original doll, which some people thought. I don't know how often you heard this, but as a Chucky fan, I do hear some people say, even the original doll, like, what kid really would have wanted a doll that looked like that?
I actually have never heard that.
Yeah, well, some people say that, but at the end of the day, it's just a little kid's doll, so whatever. But this one is a much more sophisticated type of, I guess you can even, it is a robot, technically, yeah. So, whereas the original one's not. So that's a fairly striking difference there. In this movie, as it's going through its learning phases, that was, I thought, really fun, especially how it picks up on some of the bad habits, because we see at the start, okay, so this guy who's just been fired from the company, he kind of removes a lot of the safety parameters in the coding of the doll. He probably didn't have too much time to think it over. He just took out a bunch of code and then shipped it, and then we all know what happens. Yeah, so it was kind of just amusing as he picks up all these little bad habits. You see him at the start mimicking how he's brushing his teeth, and then suddenly the next scene is Andy making a sandwich with a really sharp knife, and he stabs it into the cutting board. So Chucky kind of mimics the stabbing motion. It's cute in a way.
I also did like the line, "This is for Tupac." Which I sort of laughed out loud at that scene. That's pretty funny. Probably actually one of the few really funny scenes.
Yeah, it is actually more like a puppy dog in the movie,
Yes.
in a way. So there's certain scenes in the movie where, I almost wanted to shed a tear, because he's trying to do something that he thinks is fun, or something in a loving way, ends up being a totally creepy, naughty thing that he's done, and eventually goes way over the top with it.
Only a little,
Yeah. And, there's that scene where they're watching Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, and Andy and his friends are watching this movie, they're laughing, having a good time, so Chucky's kind of seeing that like, oh, so they think that's fun, okay, he goes, gets a knife, and it's like, heads up, bitch! So, yeah, I thought it was really fun watching him kind of pick up all these bad habits, and he doesn't want to be evil. He's trying to do things out of friendship or love or whatever you want to call it, whatever he's programmed to do there. And yeah, it just goes south as he picks up all those bad habits.
There weren't that many scenes that, overly, shocked or surprised me. But that one scene in which Andy wakes up and he's just walking to the bathroom, and then he notices there's something left for him on his cabinet. I did really like that scene. And the reaction, like, oh my god, what do we do now?
Nice little bow on it and everything, yeah.
I will say, just a quick note, because of the different origin, Chucky was, in some ways, honestly, he was even a little creepier because, well, he's not exactly human, so it's felt a lot more, I don't know, like inhuman, and gave a sort of creepy vibe to it.
I guess we should mention the voicing by Mark Hamill, which I think is pretty good, but it certainly isn't going to overthrow Brad Dourif as the definitive voice of Chucky, especially since it's more of a robot this time around. There are a lot of limitations as to how much range that he can put into the voice, I think. That there's no real reason for this doll to get as angry and use as much profanity as the original Chucky does.
I would argue there's not many reasons for anybody to use as much profanity as the original Chucky did.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the voice of the doll is it's decent. It's fitting. But it's probably not anywhere near as special as the original as well.
Yeah, I think a big issue with this movie for me was that as I was watching it, there wasn't much in this movie that really stood out to me. I enjoyed it as I was watching it, but most of the scenes just sort of pass you by. And like I said, it's one of those movies where after you're done with it, you sort of wonder, well, how much of this am I going to remember in a few weeks?
Probably my biggest gripe with Cult of Chucky was the introduction of, multiple dolls. And the ending of this movie, because he can control all these other products, and he's in a he's in a department store which sells a lot of toys.
That is, by the way, one of the shittiest looking department stores I've seen in my life.
yeah, and look quite drab, I guess. And I think there's a little bit of a similarity there with him controlling all these other products, and similar to how in Cult of Chucky, you've got multiple dolls, and I don't know, it gets a little convoluted, and I'd rather just see Chucky doing the work, not getting other toys to do the work for him.
I think that was a big problem with that one, the sort of car crash sequence, like a lot of that was, sort of finally moved from Chucky himself, and I don't know, that scene in particular just really didn't do much. I'm also not entirely convinced how much I like the characters, the police officer and his mother. I don't know, I don't think they were particularly bad, but at the same time, I sort of question how much it really added to the movie. I don't think they did as much with her as I wish they did. But that one female friend of Andy's, I forget what her name was. It was some strange name.
Fallon?
Yes. Yeah, I've never heard that name before in my life. But I thought she was an interesting character, and I sort of wish they did more with her. But I don't know. I have no idea if they're going to. But if they happen to continue this story on, it'll be interesting to maybe see her come back, and especially the mother, because she's so young in this movie.
She had a very productive 16th birthday.
Yeah, that scene actually cracked me up. That's so she's pretty young here, and I sort of think it works out pretty well though. I sort of appreciate how they sort of kept the same, quote unquote beginnings that from the '88 movie. Mother just wants to get something special for her son's birthday, and you know, in this way, gets it a little easier than she did in the first one. I just think the movie has a lot of interesting things in it, but I'm just a lot of it just doesn't seem overly memorable to me.
The little buddy song they sing is kind of catchy.
Is that also on your Spotify?
Well, maybe in the future. Well, I mean, if you listen to just the simple lyrics towards the end of it, there's a little bit of a creepiness to it.
Well, because that's also how the movie, the song that went through the credits was just that song playing, and that was so creepy. It actually, in a way, it sort of reminded me of Under the Line, which also ended with a very sort of low-key song that on the surface might not, be overly sinister, but it just sort of came off creepy.
Yeah. Probably not as creepy as the song in End of the Line.
Yeah, I don't think much can be as creepy as that. I have to say I was somewhat disappointed there's no after-credits scene, but that's okay.
Yeah, well, geez, I hate after-credit scenes, and especially if I enjoy the movie, I typically try to just listen through the whole credits, even just like listen to the music that they've got playing and see if it adds anything to the movie or not. Not necessarily wait for a scene, but it's so much more difficult in a theater. You've got people in there like trying to rush you out of the theater. Like you feel kind of weird for staying all the way to the end.
Yeah, I guess it's worth mentioning. I saw this movie like a week and a half after it came out. So in my theater, there's like maybe 25 people there. I was actually surprised there was that many, especially in my area. I'm sort of in Midwest USA. It's not like a giant craving for horror movies. I don't know. Mostly it was just teenagers who came. I had an okay theater experience, and with not that many people there, did it really bother me? And I sort of, because this was toward the end of the night. I think this is probably the last movie they had playing, so I was able to stay until the end without any issue, but I didn't really get anything from it. So that was just somewhat disappointing, but that's okay.
And I noticed, I saw the soundtrack popped up on YouTube like a week or two ago, I think just before the movie came out, like the full soundtrack, and they actually also redid the original theme music. I'm not sure. I'm guessing it didn't play at any stage at the end credits, which I didn't really stick around too much for.
I didn't notice it, but then again, I could have been deeply unabsorbent.
But yeah, if you go on YouTube, there is a different version of it. Maybe it's like a hidden type track on the soundtrack, because the YouTube video I watched, I think you have to skip all the way to the end after like 30 minutes of silence, and then you can hear it. And I only found out because of the YouTube comments. Anyways, as I said, it is a remake of my all-time favorite film, and I think for a lot of people that would typically be tough to watch. But for me, it didn't really affect me all that much because it's just so different. A few basic details are the same, but just so much of it is different that it almost feels like a totally different movie. And I really enjoyed a lot of the interactions with the doll and how it learns, and as it builds up its homicidal profile, if you will. The ending could have been a little better. It feels like Chucky gets defeated a little too easily.
So I do just point out the ending after that, where maybe the evil isn't truly over. That sort of bothered me because I don't know how that even happened. It seems like a sci-fi ending to me. Yeah,
there's definitely a sci-fi aspect to it. I don't know if I'd lump it into a sci-fi category, but yeah, it because it's so technology-driven, I guess you could say that. But yeah, overall, just from a pure enjoyability standpoint, like I did have a lot of fun watching the movie. And while I think the movie itself probably not as good as a lot of the other Chucky movies, I still give it a 9 out of 10.
That has to be one of the highest ratings I've heard anybody give it.
Yeah. Look, I mean, for me, the first two original Chucky movies are 10 out of 10s. And then I would say I enjoyed this just as much, if not slightly more, than something like Bride of Chucky, which I'd give an 8. So, yeah, I did struggle between an 8 and a 9, but I think I'm settling, or I'm just giving it a slight edge, and it just makes it to a 9.
Yeah, so I sort of liked quite a few things in this movie, but there's just so many unspectacular scenes, just so sort of run-of-the-mill type horror scenes. I don't know, it's just a movie that didn't strike me as anything special. And I feel like many of the reviews I've read have been somewhat lukewarm, and that's pretty much how I feel about it. I wasn't really expecting all that much from it, but I don't know, even so, I was just sort of, the whole thing sort of felt sort of meh to me, so, I don't know. I ended up giving this an above average rating anyway, a 7.5, but probably if I had to round it down to a 7, because while there's decent things in the movie, and so, characters I really liked, there wasn't that much going for it. And like I said, there's only really one good kill that stood out, including a heated pipe and a table saw, but that was pretty much it. Everything else was, it just didn't do much for me. And the whole conclusion, while it was nice to see Tim Matheson, I was sort of expecting something a little more epic than what we got. And a part of that, like Chucky said, is probably because the Chucky doll gets defeated a little more easy than you might expect it to. So I don't know. I feel okay with my 7.5 rating. It was definitely an okay movie, and I don't think it's going to like really disappoint many people. But I also have a hard time believing there's going to be all that many people who come out of the theater saying, "Hey, I've got to get this on Blu-ray and DVD. It's my all-time favorite." I just don't see it.
Though I do got to get it on Blu-ray when it comes out.
I'm sure you do. I did hear somebody say, and I have no idea what you feel about this, but somebody said that if they had taken this a different way, if they had called it a Child's Play remake, but just changed the design of the doll, and just went with a whole new movie, people might have liked it more. So, just something I wanted to mention.
I think that's the problem, that a lot of people find it difficult to not compare it to the original. And because they're comparing like for like, it just, you can't help but say, well, this movie didn't do that specific scene as well as the original did. Like you said, there's a sequence towards the end involving a car, which I guess is their own version of the car sequence in the original where Chucky's, stabbing through the seats and stuff. It's not anywhere near as entertaining as the original scene, even though it's different characters, kind of a different outcome.
I do have a little story about this. Some of the people in the theaters, there was a woman with, I believe, was probably her either son or grandson. It's a young kid, no more than like 8. After the movie was over, I heard this woman asking her son or grandson, what he thought about the movie. And this kid, so take this, with a grain of salt. But this kid said it was probably his favorite version of Chucky, which I thought was interesting. Which means this kid has seen the other Child's Play movies. So I know that's just sort of cute. So apparently some people were happy with it. So hey, who am I to complain?
Yeah. I wouldn't mind a doll that does all these things for me. Sings me to sleep.
I do not want a doll that can tap into my TV and my car. I don't want that. So yeah, I'm going to have to do a hard pass.
I guess I'll just continue with what I was saying earlier. I did go watch a movie last night. It was the new Annabelle movie, as you guessed correctly. Well, the funny thing about it is, it's my daughter's 15th birthday tomorrow, and she went to it with some of her friends and her boyfriend, but because they're still fairly young, didn't want to... I mean, they could be there by themselves, and that's fine, but I don't know. My wife and I kind of tagged along, but we sat separately, far away, because we wanted to see the movie too. And, well, I guess it's been a while since I've actually seen a movie on a Friday night, and there were actually quite a lot of people watching this movie. I wouldn't be able to tell you exactly how many, but I dare say somewhere between 50 to 70. And we had like this whole row of these like frat guys.
That sounds exciting.
Probably after the movie they all go back to wherever they live and beat each other up. I don't know what they do, but they weren't even the worst people in the theater though. But they throughout the movie they'd crack jokes and you kind of like, yeah, we get it, you're fucking hilarious. Shut the fuck up. And then throughout the first hour of the movie, it actually wasn't that bad with people in the crowd. There was some people, occasionally talking or saying something, but nothing that would have you screaming at them. And then suddenly, in the last half hour of the movie, just these people came from nowhere, I guess outside of the cinema. They came in, and I mean, it's an extra like 4 people maybe. They came in, sat right next to me, and next to these other 2 girls who were there the whole time. They somehow knew each other. I don't know if they were halfway through another movie and just decided to switch cinemas and just start watching this movie, but once they sat down, it was almost like non-stop talking, to the point where I looked across and I'm a really big guy with big beard and everything, so I'm probably scary to some people. I looked at them and I said, guys, you're talking way too goddamn much. And then they did quiet down, at least for the most part. But whenever there was like a jump scare scene, these are type of obnoxious people who would just scream at the top of their lungs and like, oh my god, that was so scary, and it just really ruined the last half hour, especially.
So I don't have much of an experience. I'm going to theaters. I don't go to the theaters very often, though I have to admit I am heavily considering going to see Midsommar when that comes out. The last time before Child's Play I went to the theaters was to see the 2017 It movie, and there was a bunch of high school kids there, but for the most part, the audience was able to, contain themselves. I just mentioned this because one of the movies I saw before that, this is way back in, I think it was 2012, but the Woman in Black, when that came out, the remake, when I saw that movie, like you said, there's a whole bunch of younger individuals. I mean, I was pretty young at the time too, but a bunch of younger individuals who are every single jump scare screamed like, it's the scariest thing they've seen in their lives, like they didn't see it coming through the music cues. So yeah, I can certainly see how that can be a bit much.
Yeah. Well, I think I've learned that Friday nights and possibly Saturday nights, they're the nights where all the crowds are out and, the Netflix crowd, I'll call them. The kind who just sit and watch stuff and play on their phone. And yeah, and that's another thing. They actually were, I don't know what they were doing, but their phone screen was really bright and flashing every now and then. And yeah, just annoying bunch of people.
Well, aside from that though, was the movie itself what you were hoping for?
It's more or less similar to the other Annabelle movies, which I know you haven't seen, but yeah.
Yeah, I just asked because that movie, The Annabelle Comes Home, that's one of the trailers we got before Child's Play started, and there was like 2 other horror trailers, and I thought Annabelle Comes Home looked like the worst of those movies.
It probably had a few decent scares in it. Yeah, in terms of how good the actual movie is, it's somewhere between a 6 and a 7 for me, which is okay. But yeah, it's so hard for me now to rate it just because that last half hour with the experience in the actual theater, I was just so distracted in that last half hour, which is where a lot of the things were happening.
Yeah, I can imagine so.
I probably missed a few key, well, I don't know if you want to call them key elements, but just significant moments in the movie. I'm sure I'll still review it and rate it eventually.
Oh, you say that.
There are some, there's this type of bride character in the movie, this, ghost or demon or whatever they're called, I guess ghost, that wears, a wedding outfit, a white one. And there were a couple of scenes involving that which I thought were quite creepy, but Yeah, overall, it's kind of like, when you watch Conjuring 2 and you've got the nun character. You see the nun, but then they go, ooh, this is a creepy character, let's make a full movie about it. It doesn't really work. They could...
It might not surprise anyone to learn I've not actually seen The Conjuring 2.
Okay. Well, yeah, it's more or less fairly similar to the first movie.
So pretty bad then, got it.
Well, I think whatever you think of the first Conjuring movie is probably more or less what you're going to think about all these other spin-offs and sequels. They kind of all follow a similar formula. There's not a whole lot that stand out in that universe, I think. They're all kind of cut from the same cloth.
And it's a very bland, generic cloth. Nobody would make a dress out of, so.
Well,
and of course, I say this, but I've actually only seen the first Conjuring once, so it's entirely possible once I see it again, the movie will do a lot more for me.
Yeah.
And I'm actually hoping it does.
Yeah, and The Conjuring, it's another James Wan thing, which I think he kind of borrowed a lot from Insidious, which is a movie that he also made. And even though the Conjuring universe doesn't, I don't think it includes the Insidious movies or characters or anything like that. They don't consider that a part of the same universe. They have a lot of similarities. And I think the very first Insidious movie is really good. And then it just, it's a formula that they've applied to this Conjuring universe, which just, I don't know, it's just...
I think it's true for most movie series that the more sequels that come out and the more spin-offs that come out, the generally speaking, the less quality the movies become. There might be a few exceptions. I do think, if I know that you've seen Terrifier. I feel like a lot people tended to like Terrifier more than All Hallows Eve, based on reviews I've read, and since Terrifier is sort of taken from All Hallows Eve, it's just not exactly the same, but worth mentioning.
Well, now that you brought up Terrifier, it made me think of a point that I actually meant to bring up during our discussion for Child's Play, the remake, is that another reason why I think I enjoyed it is because there's a horror personality in that movie. Like, Chucky is a personality, a character, and we see all these supernatural type movies, that kind of clog up the theaters every single year. We rarely get good horror personalities. We've got back in the 80s, you've got, Freddy and, all Pinhead, Michael Myers, all these types of genre staples in terms of characters. We don't really get them anymore.
Yeah, I think even up to the 90s, you had like Ghostface from the Scream movies, and even if you're not a big fan of the Scream movies, those were pretty popular at the time. So.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm trying to think in the last 10, 15 years, what new original movie has created a good horror personality? I mean, we've got...
Well, I would say Jeepers Creepers almost fits. It came out 2001, but I mean, it almost fits.
Bit outside the 15-year range, but
only by 4 years.
That's probably the last one that I can recall off the top of my head. Maybe there is another one, but I guess that's why I think the Child's Play remake was quite enjoyable for me, and obviously the It remake, because Pennywise, he's a personality. We just don't really get them anymore, and that's
I'll be honest, I never actually thought of that, but I'm looking through a list of horror movies I've seen, and I'm not seeing many that stick out as some like new Apple class horror personality. So
I mean, Art the Clown in Terrifier, he's kind of there, but it's such a... It's still quite a unknown movie, at least outside of hardcore horror fans. So,
I mean, and to be fair, I just think if you're not a hardcore horror fan, I have a hard time believing that you would actually like Terrifier.
Yeah.
That's just my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, it's another one of those movies where I think there's a bit of a love-hate thing going on with it, even among horror fans. Some people dig it, some people think it's crap.
Yeah, I will say, actually speaking on that, you probably saw this, but the sequel was Terrifier 2, was, if I recall, successfully crowdfunded within 24 hours. So
yeah, I saw memes about it because they're charging some pretty ridiculous prices for their perks.
Apparently it worked though.
Well, it worked. Yeah. I mean, $100 for a DVD.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't do that one, but that's just me.
Yeah,
I definitely watched Terrifier 2, but
yeah, that's a hefty price tag, especially when you can probably buy it for $20 when it actually does come out.
Unless you just do a limited release just to piss everybody off.
Oh, nah. I mean, if it's gonna sell, they're gonna make more. So, more copies. I mean, not necessarily more movies, but yeah. We'll eagerly await the release of that movie. And another similar movie, I guess, is which has been trying to get crowdfunding, was the third Laid to Rest movie, which I think is going ahead. They just, probably still waiting for more money to be made before they can really get it off the ground, but it sounds like they're going ahead with it.
Yeah, I'll simply say about the Laid to Rest series, I liked a lot of the things in the first movie, but the second movie, I don't think it was necessarily terrible, but it was such a steep decline that I have very, very little excitement for a third one.
Yeah, so that's another one where, like, in terms of horror characters, yeah,
Chrome Skull?
Chrome Skull, yeah, he's kind of on the same level as Art the Clown, I think, but both of them, they're definitely not going to reach any kind of global status like all these other ones, like Freddy, Jason, Michael, Chucky, yeah.
I guess the big question is anything ever going to be able to do the same amount that, Chucky or Freddy Krueger is able to do? I mean,
I think they can.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. The whole genre in the last 15 years is, there's always shifts in the genre, but it seems to me, there's such a heavy emphasis on the more supernatural side of things. And, for a while there's a whole exorcism phase going on, like in the, 2010s, the early 2010s, so, I don't know. I think if you can move more toward more of a heavier slasher basis, it might be more likely we can reach something like that.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the problem these days, is just they think all the money is in making all these ghost movies, and
apparently it is if they keep making them. But
yeah, well, yeah, but when the second Strangers movie came out, which is pretty much a pure slasher movie, I really enjoyed it because it was just so different to everything else that's in the theaters. Finally I got to see a slasher movie in the theaters.
Yeah, no, I've not seen the Happy Death Day movies. I've heard positive things about the first one, mixed things about the second one. But I mean, it seems like they're at least to some extent trying something new.
Those have slasher elements, but I still wouldn't even call them full slasher movies. Yeah, I mean, they've got a masked killer, but there's other things kind of going on outside of that, so it's yeah. I wouldn't even though I would give it a slasher tag, I just, it just doesn't have that same.
I will say, on a somewhat related note, I actually heard that, and I don't have the exact date in front of me, but I think they're making a new Saw movie. So, if they do that, that's going to be
Well, no, I think they start filming it next week. But
now, do we know if this is a I didn't read much about this. Do we know if this is like continuing the story, or is this sort of like a reboot?
To be honest, I haven't really read much about it. I think the director of the second movie is doing it. I think or at least he's involved. I'm not sure, but it's one of those series that I don't think it needs a remake just yet. Give it another 20 years, maybe.
Yeah, so that'll be in a future show interesting to talk about, because much like your name is, screen name is Chucky, I chose, my name Jigsaw because the first Saw movie was pretty influential in me becoming a horror fan. But that is probably and unfortunately the sequels sort of ruin it, but that's okay.
Yeah.
I try not to be a bitter guy.
I mean, when you think about it, it has been 15 years since the original, which is quite a long time, but still, it's a movie that doesn't feel like it's aged all that much. So,
I mean, once they start remaking Jeepers Creepers, Final Destination, and Saw, that'd be a bad time.
Yeah. But so some of these other movies from the 70s and 80s getting remade, I can kind of understand, bringing that story to a more modern generation of film goers, but yeah.
Although at the same time, I'm not entirely sure the Poltergeist remake was all that necessary.
It's funny you mention that, because before my experience with idiots at the Annabelle movie last night, the previous movie I watched, where I had a similar type crowd of people that we had to tell to shut up, was that Poltergeist remake. Yeah. And that movie, I didn't particularly care too much for it, but I only ever watched it once and haven't watched it since, so I can't really recall if it was worth watching again, but it certainly didn't stand out. But then again, I'm not a huge fan of the original either. I think the original's okay, but not special for me either.
I'm assuming you think that Tobe Hooper's best movie is Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah, well, I'm not even convinced that the original Poltergeist was directed by Tobe Hooper. I know he gets credited as a director, but I think Spielberg actually directed it more than he did. So.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I don't know that much about the production history.
I did listen to someone involved in the movie, and he got asked that question: is it really Tobe Hooper's movie or is it Spielberg's movie? And he just said something like, when you watch the movie, does it feel more like a Tobe Hooper movie, or does it feel more like a Spielberg movie? And that's your answer. Yeah. And it definitely feels more like a Spielberg movie.
Yeah, I'll just say that Poltergeist, even if it's not necessarily a Tobe Hooper movie, it's sort of about the movie than Texas Chainsaw Massacre, so that could be the controversial note too.
You think it's better than Texas Chainsaw Massacre?
Yes. I should, preface this by saying, and I saw this in previous shows, my opinions on some horror movies are very different than some other people's opinions, which...
You're a disgrace to slasher fans everywhere.
Well, in many ways, the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre doesn't really feel like a slasher. It means no Black Christmas. Actually, now that you mention it, we should probably make Texas Chainsaw Massacre next 5 shows, because that's definitely a classic that would be an interesting conversation.
I guess there's nothing else to say but toodle-oo.
Bye, guys.
Bye.